Joining us now, White House economic policy correspondent at The Washington Post, Jacob Bougage, staff writer for The Atlantic, Toulouse Olorunnipa, Republican strategist and former RNC communications director Doug Heye, and former communications director and spokesman for Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, and a former staffer for Senator Dick Durbin, Michael Hardaway. Thank you guys for joining us. I guess I'm going to go rogue. I'm going to start with you, Doug. I want you to tell me what you think of all these optics.
Thanks so much.
Usually I start with reporters, but I'm going to start with you. Tell me about the optics.
I think the optics here are fine if you're a Republican. If Donald Trump felt pressure to be here, he would have been here. Obviously, he also went to Israel and the Middle East earlier during this shutdown. If Mike Johnson felt that House Republicans had to be here, they would be here. Mike Johnson doesn't feel any pressure. John Thune doesn't feel any pressure. Donald Trump doesn't feel any pressure on this. And ultimately, they feel that they're going to win this. Democrats think they're going to win it, too. They both can't be right, and I'd argue actually both are ultimately wrong. No one wins a shutdown. I experienced the 2013 shutdown and privately would say to colleagues, sometimes to some journalists, we've made a big mistake here. Not in the past, but we are making a mistake here. But ultimately, thinking that in 2013, voters had long forgotten about the 2013 shutdown when they went to vote in 2014. And I'd wager with this shutdown as well, even though it's going into some unprecedented areas, that when we're talking a year from now, Katie, we're not talking about a shutdown. Donald Trump will distract us 57 times between now and then.
Okay.
And then there's also the real news of the world that goes on that distracts us as well.
With a straight face, Doug, that if this was a Democrat who was overseas, getting a golden crown and getting feted in this way during a government shutdown, that you at the RNC would not be cutting ad after ad after ad with that split screen.
Sure, that's what you do. You know, I remember during the Gulf oil spill, with the BP oil spill in the Gulf of America, let's be clear on that, we used a lot of footage of Barack Obama playing golf and said that he's playing golf instead of, he's calling for a tea time instead of calling the president or CEO of BP. That's what you do when you're in those jobs. So if the DNC or the DCCC is doing that, they're doing their jobs. I get it. I just don't think that seeps through in a way that voters are focused on. And as an example, in Washington and New York City, we have spent a lot of time in the past 2 weeks talking about the East Wing of the Capitol. But my guess is if you go to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, or Watertown, New York, they're going to be talking about beef prices. They're going to be talking about energy prices. They're not talking about the physical structure of the White House.
All right. Jacob, do you see what Doug is arguing, that these Republicans don't feel the pressure?
I do. I don't think it's unreasonable to say that the president is going to distract us 57 times between now and when voters go to the polls, and voters are not going to be casting their ballots based on a government shutdown. I think they could be casting their ballots around whether SNAP benefits are preserved or if the White House is going to choose to not put those contingency funds that we've been talking about all week out into the world. But we haven't felt a lot of pain from this, and government shutdowns end because of political pain.
Good point. Toulouse, talk to me about the pain that people are feeling.
Well, 42 million Americans is not a small percentage of the American population, including a large percentage of American children who rely on those SNAP benefits. So this is really the first time that the shutdown is going to be painful to a large segment of the American public. And yes, no one is really likely to be voting on this in more than a year during the midterms, but we are having elections next week in Virginia, in New Jersey, and those elections do run in the back of the minds of people who are going to be running in the midterms. They want to see what the margins are. They want to know whether or not there is going to be a blue wave coming. And they will be looking at some of those elections. And those elections will be impacted by what's happening with the government shutdown, and specifically in Virginia, where you have so many federal workers who feel like they have been taken for granted and likely will be coming out in large numbers. And so this next week could be the week in which the shutdown goes from something that's sort of theoretical and impacting a small, relatively small percentage of the American population to something that's felt nationwide and that people start to pay attention to. And even if government funding or the ballroom are not the things that are going to be on the minds of the public, which I agree with Doug, that's not something that a lot of people outside of Washington and New York are really spending a lot of time talking about. The affordability crisis is something that people are talking about, and SNAP benefits and government funding and making sure that air traffic control and everyone else that are federal workers are getting paid. That all does play into the affordability issue. And that could be something that could hurt both parties going into not only next week's elections, but into the 2026 midterms.
I wonder if the question for Republicans here and for politics is what type of people are struggling? Because the president made his own definition of who is struggling. Let me play what he told reporters about who SNAP is used by.
All they have to do is say the government is open, and that's the end of it. And, largely, when you talk about SNAP, you're talking about largely Democrats. But I'm president. I want to help everybody. I want to help Democrats and Republicans. But when you're talking about SNAP, if you look, it's largely Democrats. They're hurting their own people.
Michael, is it just Democrats?
By the way, I had no idea where that answer was going, by the way. But it's not Democrats. It's largely Republicans in the South, actually. And as we know, it's largely Caucasian lower-income people. And that is borne out by the overwhelming majority of people that are in the middle who are saying, what is happening here? I voted for Donald Trump, but I didn't vote for my health care benefits or my Medicaid or for my food assistance to go away. And that is happening. As we look at the fallout here, look, Democrats are always going to believe one thing. Republicans on the far right will always believe one thing. But what do the moderates and the independents say? And he's underwater with them on all of these issues.
You don't think Democrats are running a real risk here? I mean, I know the polling shows right now Republicans are being blamed, but the Republicans have said over and over again that they're willing to reopen the government. Democrats just have to vote. They voted in the Senate 13 times, and the Democrats have voted no. John Fetterman has been critical of the Democrats on this. He's a Democrat in Pennsylvania. Are you sure they're not making a miscalculation about who's going to be seen to be at fault on this, Michael?
No, and I'll tell you why. I think the working class is under assault. You've got sky-high prices. You've got falling wages. You've got, in the reconciliation bill that Trump signed earlier this year, that was already the largest cut in Medicaid history. So now you're also saying we're going to gut the subsidies that allow tens of millions of Americans to have health care under Obamacare and get rid of SNAP. And so for that reason, I don't think it's problematic because it's not one thing. It's a continuance of this war on working people that we're seeing this year.
Jacob, you do a lot on the cost of living. Have things gotten cheaper, easier in this country since Donald Trump was elected?
No, things have not gotten cheaper nor easier. He likes to talk about the cost of energy and especially the cost of fossil fuels. And he does have a point on some of those cases that some of those prices have gone down, but grocery prices are up, retail prices are up. For someone who said he wanted to come in and lower prices on day one, he hasn't done that. And I think to Michael's point about who's going to own the blame for this, there's a statistic in the polling that we released that's really telling, and it's for independent voters who by a 2-to-1 margin blame Republicans and President Trump more than they blame Democrats. These are folks that have had a month to make up their minds, and they're pretty consistent on this.